Hi everyone. In this video we're going to talk about solving polynomial equations, equations that involve polynomials. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to use a very special property called the zero product property. The zero product property says that if the product of two numbers is equal to 0, then one of those two numbers must equal 0. And this should make sense, right? We know if we take any two non-zero numbers and multiply them together, we get a non-zero number. That will always happen. Think about it. Furthermore, we also know if we ever multiply a number by 0, we always get 0 as an answer. So therefore, if I multiply two numbers together and get 0, one of those two numbers must have equaled 0. So that's where the zero product property comes from. It's just that observation. And we're going to use this property to help us solve polynomial equations. This process involves several steps. We need to first make sure that on one side of the equal sign we have 0, right? So that we can use the zero product property. Secondly, we are going to need to factor our polynomial so that we actually have written it as a product, because the zero product properties has to do with a product. So the second step is factoring the polynomial. The third step is to employ the zero product property and to say that, okay, well, one of those two factors must equal 0. And the fourth step is to solve the resulting equations that come from setting those factors equal to 0. So that four-step process will allow us to solve polynomial equations. So let's take a look at this first one. Here we're asked to solve this polynomial equation. Okay, so we want to make sure first that one side of the equal sign is a 0. Well, we've got that, so that's already done for us. Secondly, we want to make sure that we've factored our polynomial, right? So we actually have a product on the other side of the equal sign. Well, that's also already done here. This problem's already taken care of that. This is already factored. So we go to step 3. Step 3 says to use the zero product property. The zero product property says that if the product of two things is equal to 0, then one of these two things, at least one of them, must have equaled 0. So that's where we are. We know that either x equals 0, the first thing in the product equals 0, or the second factor in the product equals 0. So or 2x plus 5 equals 0. And these are the two equations that we now need to solve. So this one's already solved. X equals 0. Done. Let's go to the next one. Well, I'll subtract 5 from both sides. Divide both sides by 2. And we see x is negative 5/2. So we have two solutions to this equation. The solutions are x equals 0 or x equals 5/2. If x is either one of these values, that will be a solution. Okay, here's our next example. We want to solve this polynomial equation. X squared minus 49 equals 0. So let's go through the steps. The first step was to make sure that on one side of the equal sign we have a 0, and we do. So that part's done. Step 2 was to factor the other side, right? We need to factor it to write it as a product so that we can use the zero product property. So let's do that. We need to factor this. So pause the video now, factor this, and we'll come back and check our factorizations together. Okay, so pause the video. 3, 2, 1. Okay, welcome back. Hope you got it factored. Let's just check our work together. I'm noticing here that this is a difference of squares. Notice that this is x squared minus 7 squared. And I know that a difference of squares factors as follows. X squared minus 7 squared will factor as x minus 7 times x plus 7. Okay, great. Now, step 3, employ the zero product property. We have the product of two things equals 0. Zero product property says one of these two things, at least one of these two things must equal 0. So either x minus 7 equals 0 or x plus 7 equals 0. These are two equations that we can now solve. So let's solve this one. Add 7 to both sides. X equals 7. Solve this one. Subtract 7 from both sides. And there's our solution. X equals 7 or X equals negative 7. Sometimes people would write the answer like this. And an alternative way to write the answer. Right? So they mean the same thing. Okay, our next example. Solve x squared plus 9 equals 6x. So let's go through our steps. The first step was to make sure the right-hand side, or either side, is equal to 0. Well, it's not. All right, so we have some work to do. How can we arrange that one side of an equation equals 0? Well, we use algebra. Okay, we can subtract 6x from both sides. That's what I'll do. So let's see, x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 0. I have used algebra to get the equation into the form that I need. Okay, now we can go to step 2. We need to factor the other side, the side that's not 0. So let's pause the video now, factor this, and we'll check our work together. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. Okay, welcome back. Let's check our work. I don't know about you, but I realize that this is actually the square of a binomial, right? This number, if I take half of this number and square it, I get this number, right? So I know that this is a square of a binomial here. So this actually is just x minus 3 squared. All right, another way to write that is x minus 3 times x minus 3. So now step 3, use the zero product property. Zero product property says that one of these factors must be equal to 0, at least one. So either x minus 3 equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0. But there's no sense to write the same thing twice, right? So I'm just going to write it once. So we just have to solve this equation, step 4. So let's solve this. X equals 3. X equals 3 is the solution to our equation. Okay, our final example for this video. We have to solve this polynomial equation. So first step, make sure the right-hand side is equal to 0. Now, I'm going to realize something a little bit ahead of time. I can go ahead and subtract 50 from both sides to make that happen. But I know that the next step is going to be to factor everything, right? And to factor everything, I'm going to need everything, multiply it out so that I can, refactor it. So I'm going to actually go ahead and multiply everything out right now in the first step. Okay, so I'm actually going to start by multiplying everything out. All right, so what do I get when I multiply this out? Okay, now I'm going to subtract 50 from both sides. Okay, so now I've got a polynomial in its standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Okay, so now I want to go to step 2, factor the polynomial. So pause the video, let's factor this, and we'll check our work together. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. Okay, hopefully you realize we're looking for two factors of negative 56 that add to 1, right? So those factors are 8 and negative 7, right? So that's going to factor as x plus 8, x minus 7. And now we use the zero product property. So we know that either x plus 8 equals 0 or x minus 7 equals 0. One of those two factors, at least one, has to be 0. So we solve these equations. X equals negative 8, or add 7 to both sides over here, x equals 7. So negative 8 and 7 are the solutions to this equation.